Ken Dryden's passing, which of course you just heard Jason talking about this. You heard Mark Carney weigh in on this. It all happened on the weekend. And my takeaway so far on this is, and we found out that he died from cancer at the age of 78. But everyone I have spoken to and everything I have read suggested very few people, other than family perhaps and closest friends, knew that he was even dealing with this. So it's been difficult trying to get a hold of some people, because I think shock is the word that comes to mind right now with respect to trying to get any people he knew, played with, et cetera, to comment on this. I think most of them, certainly from a couple of people, as I said, that I reached out to, that's the main reaction so far. Ken Dryden, the greatest, well, maybe arguably, but I think for me, my generation, the greatest goaltender in Montreal Canadiens history, passing away at the age of 78 over the weekend. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but I will say, we try to reach out to about some of the players he played with are still around. And as I said, not that easy to get a hold of for whatever reason, but we'll do the best we can. Maybe at some point after this kind of hits home for a little while and settles in and realizing that he is gone, maybe it'll be different. But for right now, what I can share with you is, so Ken Dryden played with the Canadiens from, I think, 1971, right? Through 1979. He took a year in between. I didn't even remember this till I went back and read. He had a year where he actually sat out over a contract issue. So I remember I was working, in fact, here at CJD. This is 1970, 78, 79, and I was doing sports. I was doing sports on George Balkan's show, on the morning show. I was a mere child. But hockey, Canadiens hockey specifically, was something I covered. So I would go out to the games and I'd get the interviews at the end of the game. And the thing I remember most, and I posted this on my Twitter account the other day, the thing I remember most, now you're for all intents and purposes a kid, right? I'm in my early 20s, and I'm in a dressing room with beat reporters who've been there for 10, 20, 30 years, who know their ropes, whatever else, right? So it's a little intimidating, as someone who's doing this, as their first serious job in sports, to get taken seriously at all. You do your work, you go back, you cut up interview tape, et cetera, it plays the next day, that's fine. What I remember most about Ken Dryden was him giving me the time and the respect. And when I would ask a question of Ken Dryden, a serious question about the game, how he performed, how the team did that night, he wouldn't be dismissive. And some players, you learn this after a while, I don't think they mean to be dismissive. I think that's just second nature for many of them. They're talking to sports reporters all day, every night. And at some point, a lot of the questions are the same and they kind of just blow you off with 1 or 2 or 3 word answers. Not Ken Dryden. And I learned that fairly quickly. If you wanted to, talk about a Canadiens game and you wanted to talk about how they played, he would be, unless someone had scored like 5 goals in a game, right? That kind of a thing, because that person would be the focus of attention. I would go to Ken Dryden first. And I would say or ask him a question, and he would think about the question and then give me a thoughtful and insightful answer. And for that, I was eternally grateful. In other words, he took me seriously then as a kid, and always gave me a thoughtful answer. So that's the thing I remember most about him off the ice. Obviously, as a Canadiens fan on the ice, you remember him. As I said, you could argue maybe, I don't know, Patrick Roy was the Canadiens all-time, or maybe you say Jacques Plante, whoever. I think in this era, that era in the 70s, first of all, he was the best goalie, not just in the NHL, probably the best in the world at the time. And so for me, I consider him to be the Canadiens' best goalie ever. And, I don't know if records make a difference or not. He only played 8 years. But in 8 years, he won 6 Stanley Cups. Think about that for just a second. How remarkable that is. 6 Stanley Cups, 5 Vezina trophies, the best goalie in the league, 5 times in 8 years. It's mind-blowing, right? And then the part of the story that gets even more interesting is the fact that he decided, fair to say, at the height of his success, he was done with hockey. Left the game, decided he wanted to do other things with his life. I think I heard a quote this morning from someone who found one of Ken saying he realized by age 40 that half his life was over and he had other things to do. He wasn't far off the truth. He died at 78. And he went on to become a lawyer. Someone told me, it was Christine Pickrell, by the way, Christine from Westmount Florist. I bring this up only because, she was talking to some people. She knows some Habs players, I guess, from over the years, and told a story. I'm hoping it's her. Someone told me the story over the weekend that Bob Gainey, because he played around the same time, right? Remembers a time when Ken Dryden was trying to basically learn French, right? He's not from here, so I think he grew up in Kingston. And he was trying, it's Montreal, you want to learn French, you're part of the team, and was looking to live with a family that spoke French. And ended up moving in for a while anyway with his family. He used to take the bus to get to Habs games or to practice sometimes. So while he had his law books with him, right, he was still studying and thinking that's what he was going to do, and would show up, get off the bus and go to practice. He was, as they say, special in the best possible kind of way. And I know that there are some plans to honor him, to pay tribute to him, and I think that's clearly something we need to do for a variety of different reasons. What did someone say? Someone said that he was a real Renaissance man, and I think that's a perfect description. He was. Hockey was just one thing that he did in his life, and he did it exceptionally well, but he did other things, all of them, exceptionally well. Whether it was an author, a filmmaker, eventually becoming, of course, a member of Parliament, he was just an incredible human being. So to read of his passing and then to find out that it happened as suddenly as it did, with so few people knowing, maybe that's the other part of the story, right? His humility, because that was a big part of Ken Dryden as well, comes into play here. So all this to say, he will be sadly missed, and I do hope we manage to get something together, whether it's naming a street or naming an arena or something that we can do to mark his passing and remember what he contributed, not just to this hockey team, but to this city and to this country. I know we played part of the Mark Carney clip. Do you have it there, Jimmy? So this is Prime Minister Carney talking about the passing of Ken Dryden.
I met Ken Dryden very briefly once, so I felt I know Ken Dryden from his public accomplishments. I know Ken Dryden from reading the game a couple times. I know Ken Dryden from his public service. And I know Ken Dryden from a lot of people I know who really knew Ken Dryden. And so when someone like that passes, it's a blow. At the same time, you think back on their contributions. I mean, 6-time Stanley Cup winner, 5-time Vezina Trophy winner. Someone, as I said, one of the things that struck me when he passed was, when he stepped out, and I remember as a young kid at the time, and he was my favorite goalie. He was my model. I didn't have his height, didn't have his ability, obviously, but when he stepped out from the Habs to go back to law school, to article, effectively, it kind of tells you a different thing about balance in life. Hockey's not everything, even if you're one of the best players in the world, certainly the best goalie in the world at the time. And then his subsequent life as a public servant and someone who cared passionately about early childhood education, social factors, and, what came to mind. And I remember he used to talk about Big Canada, and Ken Dryden, he was Big Canada. He was in many respects, bigger than us in his hockey, in his career. But he was Big Canada, and he was best Canada. He was best of Canada. So, a tough loss, but let's draw on what he taught us as Canadians.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. I just got a note from Jen Crane saying, Aaron, Ken Dryden was the best human being I ever worked with. Kind, brilliant, and humble. I ran his Quebec leadership campaign in 2006. Thanks for your kind words. They will mean a lot to everyone. I think that's the one word that's going to come up an awful lot as people look back on the life of Ken Dryden. And I mentioned that humility. What a humble man he was. And it's so different today. I mean, just generally when you look at it, right? Humility for sports stars doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. Everything is, look at me, look at how great I am, on the field, they score a goal. One of those things in the back of my mind, like you'll watch a football game and a team will be getting killed, like losing by 3 touchdowns or something, but someone on defense will make a great tackle. Not that it matters in the ultimate outcome of the game, and they'll stop and go, hey, look at me, I made a great, your team's losing. That's what I mean when I say humble. I don't believe that exists in sports anymore. And maybe other fields too, but certainly not in sports. So yeah, that was a very different kind of person as far as Ken Dryden was concerned. Now, I understand we're going to be talking to Steve Shutt. If you're a hockey fan, you may remember Steve Shutt, amazing goal scorer back in the day on that team with Ken Dryden in the 1970s. I think he's going to join us at around 3:30, right, Alice? Okay. So we'll be hearing from him. And if we can, we were trying to reach out to a lot of different people today, but as I said, I think the shock of Ken Dryden's passing, as sudden as it was to so many people, including people who knew him, it may take a while for people to feel comfortable enough to talk about this.